All right, we are recording. So, hi everybody. I'm Bryce Huffman. I'm a reporter here at BridgeDetroit, and I'm joined by my coworker Orlando Bailey. Orlando is our engagement director, and we have been talking a little bit about a video from a protest last night. And Orlando, could you kind of just set up what exactly happened, where this took place, what's going on in the video?
Yeah, from the knowledge that I've been able to gather today, there was a protest happening in Southwest Detroit last night. And the protest, of course, as always, started off peaceful. The piece of the protest that everyone in the city now is talking about, which was also captured on video, is a police squad car sort of accelerating or driving through protesters uh, last night in Southwest Detroit.
Yeah. So I saw that video on, I don't remember exactly what time I saw it last night, but I saw the video last night and I couldn't help but think about that video from Charleston, North Carolina from a few years ago. Just seeing like bodies flailing, and it's a sight that we don't often associate with Detroit. At least, I don't that often. I tend to be one of the people who think our police, we don't have as antagonistic a relationship between community and police that a lot of other cities do. And while that's true, I think there is still tension there that needs to be addressed. So, we were just in our editorial meeting, and you made a great point about the video and just some of your thoughts on it. So what was your initial thought when you saw that video?
It was one of shock. I got to tell you, Candace Fortman, a really good friend of mine and journalist here in the city of Detroit, she describes Detroit as being living, this living, breathing thing that you have a relationship with. And, today, after, seeing that video, I am grieved by what is happening in the city of Detroit. I am grieved by the negligence on part of leaders to emphatically state that what happened last night was wrong and that it should not be the reaction of any person in law enforcement, specifically within a peaceful protest and a squad car to drive through citizens, our citizens, right? And so I'm hurt for the people in the city of Detroit. You're right about our relationship being not as antagonistic as it is in other cities, but I would say, number one, that's a pretty new phenomenon. I think folks in the generations before us will describe their experience as different, but it also does not negate that there are areas within our police department that needs reform, that needs to be gutted, that needs to be relooked at and reimagined. And this is a prime example of that. And so to see this video and to hear our leader and Mike Duggan and our deputy mayor and police chief and James Craig just sort of skirt this issue and deny that there's really anything wrong with what happened, it grieves me. It grieves me to the point where I'm angry. Like it makes me angry.
I'm glad you brought up their response, because I couldn't help but notice they had a very similar response to the concern over the Robert Williams case. The case for people watching who aren't quite up to speed. Robert Williams is a Black man who lives out in Farmington Hills. Back in January, he was arrested by Detroit police at his home, and they didn't tell him why he was arrested. And 18 hours after he was detained, he finally figured out that the detectives had used facial recognition technology to analyze video footage from the Shinola store in Detroit because a man had stolen 5 watches. And they thought, after using the search, that Robert Williams was the guy in the video. In fact, he was not. And then now we have an issue on our hands. I asked Mayor Duggan last week about the use of facial recognition, which is technology that, one of its key flaws right now is that it misidentifies Black and brown faces. Given that we're a city that is overwhelmingly Black, like, why is that a tool that law enforcement might use? And just like you said with this video, he failed to acknowledge that there's a problem. He did acknowledge that there was bad detective work, which is very true. No one's going to negate that. But it just seems like him and James Craig, they're missing part of our concern as residents. Can you just talk about that?
Yeah, I think the tendency to focus on some of the transactional things that happens rather than the system that allows for these transactional mistakes to happen is politically expedient. So if you can drill it down to one situation and say, well, in this particular situation, this happened, but this isn't normative of this isn't normal. This isn't a part of what happens normally in how we do police and detective work. One, it minimizes the problem, but it fails to recognize that the system itself is flawed, and we know that to be fact. And so a refusal to look beyond isolated incidents to recognize that this system is jacked up is also frustrating. And so I'm looking for leadership in the city and the nation to stop only doing what is politically expedient for them and really hear the voice and the cry and the frustration of the people that inhabit this city. Only certain kinds of people are going to show up to your community meeting. Only certain kinds of folks are going to show up to your Zoom call. It is up to the people that we elect and put in power to be leaders for everybody and to hear everybody, right? And so there's entire segments of our population that's not being heard because there are folks who literally refuse to come to a table that power has set, right? And power has to recognize that your table isn't the only table. Your table isn't the only table. Instead of putting an onus on an already burdened citizen in the city of Detroit, how can you show up for that citizen? How can you show up for the person that's not gonna come to the community meeting and tell Mike Duggan or James Craig that no, we don't need more police on the street. Let's figure out how we can redirect funding for mental health services or early childhood education. Oh, are we talking to the young Black teenager or the young Black male who has a very different vantage point when it comes to police versus some of the older senior citizens who come to the community meetings? We have whole entire gaps that are missing. And to blow up the small segment of people that you may or may not be talking to justify that we don't have a problem, it is irresponsible and it is frustrating to me.
You summed it up. It really is just, it's frustrating to watch their response because it comes off as callous to what it is that people are worried about. When I interviewed Duggan about the Williams case, one of the things that kept bothering me was that he was explaining how the technology is just a tool that law enforcement uses and that, really there's a policy in place now, so this wouldn't happen. The policy is from September of last year, and this man was arrested in January. Like, you can't say the policy works if the policy's not being followed,
Yes. My friend Yodit Mesfin Johnson says when it comes to power wanting to argue about isolated incidents, if they're really isolated, is we are treating the fish when the water is sick. the water is sick. And I need you to recognize that the system that creates an atmosphere whereby we can go and arrest the wrong man and get him to processing in the precinct and then recognize, oh, this ain't the man. That's not situational. That's a systems failure. And I need for power to recognize that it is not only about what is politically expedient. The thing about this is, you know, being a Black city, when it comes to disparities, disparities are exacerbated here. COVID, uh, just the poverty, disparate care in hospitals. We've seen the numbers. We've been having these conversations. I am tired, and I'm tired of having leadership in this city who fail to admit and or recognize that there is a problem that needs fixing because it is not politically expedient.
Well, I want to just offer up a little bit of time for final thoughts on uh, Duggan and Craig and the video from last night. And I guess I'll go first because I know you're going to do a mic drop sort of response.
Got nothing.
Duggan and Craig, I don't know if you're ever going to watch this video, or if you do watch it, I don't know if you'll get to this point in the video, but I want you to know that we are not holding your feet to the fire with these questions for the sake of upsetting you. We are doing it to call attention to a problem that you seem to be missing the point. The point is not just that we don't like facial recognition, and in this one case, it turned out bad. No, we're saying to you, we want you as, you know, the police chief to think about policing us in a different way, because the way that it's going right now does not work. If it was working, you wouldn't have cop cars driving through groups of people at protests. You know, they're protesting police brutality. Why are you giving them more fuel for that fire? That's all I got to say. Orlando, you got any thoughts?
Um, there are segments of the Detroit population who feel this very deeply. I am one of them. I'm a part of that segment, and I am begging and pleading our leaders to do and say what's right, and to step away from always doing what is politically expedient or that will keep them in power and a part of the status quo. We tout out numbers, we tout out data, but the thing that I am always reminded of is that there are actual people behind that data. And I feel and see those people in a deep and real way. And I hope that our political leadership, our elected leadership, will do the same.
All right. Thanks so much. I'm Bryce Huffman, reporter and producer here at BridgeDetroit. Orlando here is our engagement director. Thanks so much, Orlando.
Thank you.